Hello everyone, this is Studio Central and Eastern Europe, and here is Maryna Shevtsova, Senior Research Fellow at Catholic University Leuven, and I'm very happy today to have with us Katarzyna Wojnicka, who is Associate Professor of Sociology at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. She's also co-editor-in-chief for journal Norma, it's an international journal for masculinity studies. She's been studying for 20 years critical studies of men and masculinities in different contexts, such as migration, especially integration and social movements. She's also an awardee of Emma Goldman Research Award from 2023 for her work as a feminist scholar, as activist, and for groundbreaking writing and things she's been doing. Katarzyna, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Maryna.
And the main reason why we invited you today is, of course, your new book. You have been publishing extensively academically, but now you did this amazing thing. You have a book that is addressing broader audience. And for me, what is the most exciting, and this is a book that is in Polish, in your mother language. And at the same time, and the translation that I allowed myself to do of the title is Menology, will be Mężczyznologia in Polish. Again, pardon my pronunciation. So this is the first comprehensive sociological study of men and masculinities that is published in Poland. So tell us more. What inspired you to write this book? What kind of conversation are you opening up for the Polish public sphere, for Polish population about masculinities?
Yes, I have been thinking about writing and publishing this book for years, actually. As far as I remember, the first conversation that I had with one of my colleagues was around 2017, 2018, when I first thought that this type of publication would be really good to offer to the Polish audience, to the Polish society, Polish students, but also any type of people, like societal groups interested in the question about contemporary conditions of masculinities and also the situation of different group of men in the contemporary society. But the book has been published recently, a few months ago, so it took me like more than 7 years to actually make it happen. And of course, there has been like many reasons for that. But to be absolutely fair, one of the most important events that made it happen was the Emma Goldman Award, because Emma Goldman Award not only gave us resources to focus on the project, but also time. And the book is based on 5-7 different research projects that I have been doing for the last 20 years. I wanted to write something which will be not only interesting for scholars and academics, but also for broader audiences.
To dig deeper a bit into your analytical framework and your core argument, you introduce this triad of costs of masculinity. Masculinity, men's privileges, and differences among men. So could you talk a little bit about this?
I work with this concept of this triangle of cost of masculinities, privilege of masculinities or men's privileges and differences between men since many years now. The author of this framework is Michael Messner, which is one of the well-known sociologists of masculinities from the United States, which I consider one of the most influential when it comes to my work. And I highly recommend his writings to everyone interested in the issues of men masculinities. I adopted his framework because I believe that in the contemporary discussions about men and masculinities, we really need to include all of these three elements into the analysis. Because if we only focus on one, then we are losing quite a lot of complexity that it's always connected to gender research. But I think it's even more visible in terms of men and masculinities. So first of all, we have to talk about men's privileges, because men as a societal category are privileged. They actually experience more like a fast track in terms of, for example, career or not being that much involved, for example, in daily caring activities. Certain things are less complex than they are for people who are not identified as men. Then we also have costs of masculinities, because the fact that men are having privileges doesn't mean that they don't pay for being men. And we all know the statistics that men live shorter than women. There is no singular country on this planet where the expected average life duration would be equal for men and women. There are countries like Iceland, I think Norway, where the gap is only 2 years. But there are countries such as like in many post-Soviet republics, actually, for example, Belarus, where this gap is like almost 10 years. And this is the cost of masculinity. Being man means that you will most likely live shorter than your partner, mother, sister, or daughter, or friend, female friend. Another cost, of course, is connected to emotional well-being and mental health. Again, like we know the statistics that 8 out of 10 so-called successful suicidal attempts are committed by men. So being man also is connected to paying certain price for the manhood, for masculinities. And at the end, the third very important element of the analysis is actually identifying and admitting that men are not homogeneous social group, right? Men are different. It's not just gender which actually shapes your position in the social structure, it's also class or ethnicity or race or age or sexual identity and many, many others. So that's why it's really important never treat men as homogeneous group. Different men experience different types of cost of masculinities. The distribution is not equal. Some men are paying almost zero costs of masculinities because they have like enormous number of privileges, and some men barely have privileges connected to their gender, and they mostly actually pay the price for being men.
Could you also go into this intersectional approach to seeing men as a really diverse group? Could you maybe give some examples where this combination is really sad? There's mostly the pain and have to pay, as opposed to maybe those men who will live longer.
One of the examples comes from my research on men's migrants in Europe. And migration and integration is like really for me like the perfect kind of like ecosystem when you can actually see certain phenomena in much clearer way. And I think costs and privileges of masculinities and unequal distribution of it is one of them, because in my research I work with men coming from very different backgrounds. So in one of our projects, we were talking to men in 2 European countries, Sweden and Italy. And in Sweden, we researched men coming from Poland and men coming from Syria. While in Italy, we have been collecting narratives produced by men from Bangladesh and also from Romania. We already seen this, how different kind of like a situation, for example, when it comes to labor market, what kind of different situations, for example, Polish people and Syrian people actually faced in Sweden. Polish migrants with European Union passports being white, when it comes to labor market, for example, they actually benefited from many privileges that, for example, Syrians, like, refugees, didn't. And this is just one of the examples how it was already unequal distribution of costs and privileges. But what was interesting in this case was that we were not that much interested in, for example, this structural integration. We were mostly interested in like social integration and cultural integration, which means that we are very interested in relationships that single migrant men at that time had in Sweden and Italy. And we were especially interested in love life, in their quest for trying to find a partner, build the relationships. And majority of our research participants were heterosexual, so that was also quite an important factor. We noticed that this aspect of migrant life for men is especially difficult. So when you're a migrant from the country which is considered less developed than the country where you actually live as a migrant, as a man, you experience a huge number of struggles that are connected to finding a partner. Because of limited amount of different types of capitals, you're not that attractive for a woman who are also part of this dating market. And not just local women, also women who are coming from exactly the same migrant communities, because unlike men, women are not facing that many challenges when it comes to finding a partner. So here you can see this kind of like a gender difference. So when it comes to migration, gender is extremely important and it impacts integration trajectories tremendously. But you can also observe how this access to the dating market, for example, and the success at the dating market is connected not just to being migrant, but also to nationality. For example, if you take Polish men, they reported quite a lot of challenges. But when I talk to, for example, Americans in Sweden, it's not the same. They are not even called migrants, right? They are equally migrants in terms of migrating from one country to another due to, for example, job. But nobody calls them migrants. That's the first thing. They are so-called expats. And American man in Sweden does not really have much problems with finding partners unless he has some sort of like individual issues. So looking at migrants through the lenses of gender, but also intersectionality in terms of citizenship, ethnicity, of course, as well, age and disability, shows you very clearly that this distribution is really unbalanced.
Yeah, so there are clearly some winners and losers, if to simplify it.
Exactly.
But on the positive side, or at least it sounds positive to me, you also talk about these new caring and protective masculinities. Could you tell us more about these and how spread this new form is?
How they are spread, I don't know, because I'm qualitative scholar. But in a critical studies on masculinities, we have been working with different types of like typologies of masculinities. And one of the most recognizable, but also most powerful, and I still believe most helpful, is the hegemonic masculinity theory introduced by Leuven many years ago. And I also work with that one. But along with this particular theoretical framework, there is another quite significant and emerging category, which is called caring masculinity. And caring masculinity is being seen by majority of scholars as progressive form of masculinity, where dominance and inclination to have power is replaced by the switching into caring activities. So caring for others, caring for family members, caring for the society, caring for self well-being. And here the most important elements differentiating this hegemonic masculinity from caring masculinity is dominance and power. So in hegemonic masculinity, these two are at the core of masculine hierarchies, while in caring masculinity, the point is to get rid of dominance and power and disconnect it from masculinity and men's roles and activities. So this particular concept has been with us for 20 years now, and more people I utilize it in their own analysis of different types of phenomena connected with male masculinities, but seems to be too optimistic. So any kind of caring activity that some men actually are involved in already give them understanding that now men are more caring than anything else, and we are in this like world when progressive values connected to gender and gender equality is like winning, which is not true, because in many cases this care is not necessarily disconnected with power and with dominance. So that's why I have been also working with the concept of protective masculinity, where I distinguish protection from care. Because in many traditional discourses of men's role, for example, protecting women and children from other men is being considered as care. But to me, it's not, because this protection is always associated with authority, with power. So those that you protect need to accept that they are subordinated to you. They have to follow your lead in order to be protected. In care, you cannot really seek for power and dominance. So that's why I try to distinguish these two different types of masculine involvement in care/protection to show that power is at the core of analysis, and the attitude to power dominance distinguish different types of men's involvements in different activities between care and protection.
Before asking a final question, I was wondering also, so what has the reception been so far in Polish society? How people in Poland react to your book? Do you already get some feedback?
Yes, I mean, the book was published in June, as far as I remember. I mean, yes, I remember. It was in June. And honestly, I have been receiving quite a lot of interest. So I have been invited by a few journalists to talk about the book in major Polish newspapers and magazines. Not all of them, of course. But I mean, it's I can see that there is an interest and that the book actually fills some sort of like a gap at least in the Polish literature, scientific literature about men and masculinities. I have been invited to several events organized at different universities. Just came back from Poland a few days ago, actually. I was in Kraków and in Warszawa, like discussing book at different universities. So positive, but what is the most important for me actually right now is that I got like lots of positive feedback from exactly the members of audiences that I was hoping to attract. So, for example, several friends of my mom who are not scholars, they read the book and they were very happy because not only they understand everything, but they also agreed with many of my analysis. And most importantly, they finished the book. So, so the book is also not very thick, and that was one of my conscious decisions, not to make this kind of 500 pages long huge book that is intimidating from the start. I think it was a good idea, and I'm very happy that so many different people actually enjoyed the book and they seem to like it. I mean, I didn't get any critical feedback yet. I'm not sure if people actually do that. But yes, I'm happy to get quite positive reviews of the book.
But honestly, I think that the positive reviews of friends of your mom, it is one of the hardest audience. So
Exactly.
I'd be very happy too, indeed. So you really reached the goal. To finish, I have not an easy question, right? Because we already knew a lot about male privilege, but you talk about this cost of masculinity, about vulnerabilities that men from different groups have. And I think it is very important indeed to bring discussion to this topic. But at the same time, how do you think, what is the best way then to discuss these things without reproducing this anti-feminist backlash narratives, these manosphere arguments about women dominating the world?
Yes, this is exactly what I have been trying to do. So first of all, incorporating this triad of privilege, costs and differences. And secondly, using intersectional approach. There has been like a long discussion about intersectionality, as you know very well, and how it at times is being whitened and masculinized, and it's losing its original meaning and original rooting in a way, right? But I disagree with these voices. I believe that since intersectionality is basically the theoretical, methodological, pedagogical approach to deal with power and to understand power relations that are shaped by different societal factors, we also have to talk about men masculinities in the context of intersectionality. And by applying those two frameworks, I think we are able to discuss vulnerabilities, which are part of men's lives, obviously, but not all men, not in the same way. And we need to focus on, understanding that certain men really suffer, and it's because of patriarchy, and we should do something with that without forgetting that certain men are those who are on the top power hierarchies, and they are those who are actually making our lives miserable. I'm not giving any names now, but we all can imagine who I am talking about.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So what would be your last appeal to people who will read your book? What is the discussion that you are trying to start, or you want them to start after they finish the book and go talk to their friends?
So I would say basically the same what I have just said, that if we want to dismantle patriarchy, which is my primary goal in life, we need to involve men in this mission as well. And they need to be involved not only as allies, but they also need to be taken under consideration in the discussions about, inequalities and unequal power distributions. So there is no gender equality without men. But still, we cannot just focus on one aspect of men's experience, not just costs, not just privileges. We have to look at them from this much more holistic perspective.
Yes, let's do that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Katarzyna, for joining us today. And everybody, please buy the book, read it if you can read in Polish, or encourage your publishers to buy the rights and translate it to other languages.